The first day I moved into the old apartment building was quiet, almost eerily so. The kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the cracked windows. I was carrying a box of books when I felt her presence before I even saw her. A subtle shift in the air, a gentle warmth brushing against my arm, as if the hallway itself had suddenly changed its texture. She walked past me, her steps light but deliberate, her heels tapping a soft rhythm that seemed to echo in the narrow corridor. I caught a whiff of her perfume, subtle, floral, yet grounding in a way I couldn't immediately place. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and there was a quiet acknowledgement in her gaze that left me oddly unsettled. Then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned closer and whispered something. The words didn't fully reach me. It was more like a soft brush of sound against my eardrum. My heart skipped a beat, not just because of the voice, but because of the intimacy of the moment. The brush of her sleeve lingered longer than necessary against my arm. It wasn't overt, not in a way that could be mistaken for flirtation, yet there was a resonance in it that my senses could not ignore. I watched her move down the hall, her figure disappearing around the corner, leaving only the lingering warmth of her presence behind. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself she was simply a landlady doing her rounds, but the quiet hum of my own heartbeat said otherwise. Every detail stuck with me. The sway of her hair, the confident tilt of her chin, the faint smile that lingered as she walked away. It was a small, seemingly insignificant encounter, yet I felt as though a door had quietly opened inside me, when I didn't even realize I had been searching for. That day, I moved into the apartment fully aware that it was not just a new living space I had entered, but a world subtly shifted by someone's quiet presence. In the days that followed, I found myself noticing her everywhere. Not in a way that could be called intrusive, but with a sense of fascination that caught me by surprise. She had this unassuming elegance in the simplest of gestures. The way she leaned over to water the plants on the balcony, the careful arrangement of her books on the hallway shelves, the serene way she watched the sunset from her window. It was in these quiet, ordinary moments that her presence seemed most extraordinary. I began to study her without meaning to. The subtle arch of her eyebrows when she smiled, the graceful tilt of her head as she listened to someone speak, the faint laugh that seemed to stay with the hallway long after she had moved on. Sometimes, our eyes would meet across the courtyard or over the railing, and in those seconds, 1,000 unspoken thoughts seemed to pass between us. I looked away quickly, my heart thudding in my chest, embarrassed at the intensity of my own curiosity. There was a constant pull, something magnetic in the way she existed within that space. I caught myself imagining small scenarios, her glancing at me while reading in the lounge, her hand brushing against mine when handing over a package, a fleeting moment of shared laughter in the hallway. It was both tantalizing and frustrating, the sense of connection so close, yet always just out of reach. I started anticipating her movements, learning the rhythm of her days. And though I tried to convince myself it was mere curiosity, a quiet part of me was drawn into the possibility that something more could exist in those shared glances and accidental touches. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable, a slow burn that had taken root in the unlikeliest of places, the ordinary corridor of an apartment building. One evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows through the narrow hallways. I was leaving my apartment, lost in thought, when she appeared. She moved past me as she often did, but this time there was an unmistakable intention in the way she leaned slightly closer. Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried through the quiet like a melody meant just for me. "Be careful, you'll get lost in your thoughts," she whispered. The warmth of her breath tickled my ear, and for a moment the world around me faded. I felt the faint brush of her sleeve again, softer than before, almost reassuring. My chest tightened as a surprising surge of awareness ran through me. The realization that this was not an accidental encounter, that she had intentionally crossed into my personal space, however subtly. Her presence lingered as she moved on, leaving me rooted in place. I found myself replaying the whisper over and over in my mind, savoring the gentle intonation, the calm authority in her voice, and the vulnerability hidden beneath the confidence. It was a small gesture, yet it carried a weight I hadn't expected. For the first time, I felt truly noticed, not in passing, not as a tenant, but as someone who mattered, however briefly, in her quiet world. That night, I lay awake thinking about her words, the brush of her presence, and the flutter of emotions that were rapidly becoming impossible to ignore. What started as fascination had begun to evolve into something more, something deeper, and the whisper had ignited a slow-burning curiosity I could neither resist nor fully understand. Our interactions became more frequent, though always subtle. She began noticing details about me I hadn't expected anyone to see. The tired crease in my forehead after a long day, my favorite cup of tea left on the counter, the books I carried from one room to another. It was never overbearing, never intrusive, just a quiet awareness that made me feel unexpectedly seen. She performed small acts of kindness, adjusting my scarf when the wind caught it, brushing a speck of dust from my shoulder, handing me a cup of tea with a lingering glance that suggested she noticed more than I could articulate. Each gesture left me feeling warm and slightly breathless, a growing awareness of our connection that was impossible to ignore. In those moments, the tension between us grew, unspoken but palpable. I found myself seeking her out in the hallway, savoring the subtle, brief moments of interaction that made the mundane feel extraordinary. And though nothing explicit passed between us, there was a quiet intimacy building, a shared rhythm in gestures, glances, and the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's presence. I began to realize that the pull I felt was no longer just curiosity. It was admiration, longing, and a sense of emotional safety I hadn't anticipated. Each small act she performed felt intentional, though never forced, a gentle weaving of our lives together in the quiet corners of the apartment building. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on the courtyard bench as the sun began to fade. She spoke softly, sharing a memory, a quiet regret from her past, a fleeting moment of vulnerability that seemed at odds with her composed exterior. I listened, heart attentive, feeling a warmth of connection and protectiveness rise inside me. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her hand lingering for just a moment, and I felt the subtle vibration of her presence against mine. My own hands itched to reach out, to provide comfort, yet I hesitated, aware of the fragile space we were navigating. Each glance, each brush of her hand against my arm, conveyed unspoken emotions, a growing awareness of mutual attraction tempered by caution. It was in this quiet sharing that I first felt truly close to her, not just in admiration, but in understanding. The boundaries between us remained intact, yet the emotional bridge between our hearts was becoming undeniable. That evening, I understood that romance could exist without words, in gestures and glances, in the quiet acknowledgement of each other's humanity and hidden longing. The next day, or perhaps the one after, we shared a small, deliberate moment of affection. She allowed me to hold her hand briefly, a warmth that spoke volumes without needing words. We stood close on the balcony, the afternoon sun casting golden light over us, and I felt the gentle steadiness of her heartbeat through a soft touch. We exchanged no grand declarations. There was no rush, no melodrama. Just the quiet, abiding connection of two hearts recognizing each other, finding warmth in subtle gestures and shared silences. In that moment, I understood the beauty of age, of experience, and the way love could exist in quiet spaces, in whispered words and tender touches. I left the courtyard that day with a sense of completeness, knowing that sometimes the gentlest gestures, an arm brushing yours, a whispered caution, a lingering glance, can carry a lifetime of possibilities. The story ended, not with fireworks or grand declarations, but with a quiet, tender resolution. Two souls drawn together in understanding, respect, and an unspoken, age-defying romance.